thanking our sponsors, Baruch Hashem, to thank all of our sponsors for today's share, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tammuz, Shmuel Leba Dinovitz, for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month in the zechus of an aliyah for the neshama of Shmuel's father, HaRav Peretz Avraham, Harav Benyamin Moshe. To thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Ira Miriam Grossman, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Ira's mother, Frieda Grossman, Frieda Bas Shmuel, Zichron Libracha. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Bill and Raizy Eskin, for refuah sheleimah for Baruch, Mendel, HaCohen, Ben, Sara, Rivka. And we thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, Baruch, Meir, and Rena, Dubin, in the merit of a refuah sheleimah for their niece, Chava Tzipporah, Bas Chaya Malke, who is undergoing a bone marrow transplant today. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of those who require a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael, all of the neshama, shav, and aliyah, and the families in neshama. And with that, let us begin. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Chaf Aleph 21, and we are picking up Emir Hashem at the Mishnah on Chaf Amud Beis 20b. Says the Mishnah, so again, still in the sugya of Kiyam Shtaros, of going ahead and upholding and certifying documents, and again, kind of getting, let's see. Says the Mishnah, Ze Omer, listen to this, Ze Omer Ksav Yadi, V'zeh Omer Ksav Yado Shel Chaveri, V'zeh Omer Ksav Yadi, V'zeh Omer Ksav Yado Shel Chaveri. So, it's an interesting case. Reuven and Shimon signed on a document. So, whereas in the end of yesterday's daf, we spoke about the idea that we had a case where Reuven and Shimon had both died, right? And now others were trying to come to really go ahead and certify and then I guess repudiate the document. Here in this case, what's happening? We have a document. A lent to be money. It's being contested in Beis Din. So what happens? Reuven and Shimon, the witnesses, show up. Baruch Hashem, they're alive and well. They show up. So what happens? Reuven comes along and he says, listen, that Reuven signature, that's me. And Shimon, that's my friend Shimon. That's his signature. I know who he is. So what Reuven's essentially doing is he's attesting to the validity of his signature and to the validity of Shimon's signature. Shimon then comes to Beis Din and Shimon says, oh, I'm Shimon. That's my signature. And I recognize Reuven's signature as well. What's the halacha, says the Mishnah? Hare elu ne'emanim. They are believed. Look at Rashi. Hare elu ne'emanim. Di'ika treis sahadi dimisadi akol ksav v'ksav. Because Rabbi say essentially, what do you have? You have two witnesses who are testifying about each signature. Right now, Rabbi say, granted, one of the witnesses on each signature is who? Is the aid himself, but that's okay. We've already spoken about this, that a person is believed to say in Beis Din, Ze Ksav Yadi. This is my signature. So therefore, halacha l'maaseh, that is not a problem. Okay, that's case number one. I will say, the truth is, that's actually a pashat case, straightforward case, not even a shaila. Excellent. Here we go. Ze Omer, Ze Ksav Yadi. Ze Omer, Ze Ksav Yadi. I will say, what happens if Reuven and Shimon come along? And Reuven says, yes, I recognize my signature. They ask him, do you recognize Shimon's? He says, no, I don't. I know that, Shimon and I remember I signed together with Shimon, but I don't recognize his signature. Shimon comes along and says, I recognize my signature, but not Reuven's signature. So here essentially what do you have? You have each witness attesting to the validity of his own signature, but not commenting on the other. So Rabbi say, what's the halacha in such a situation like this? What's the halacha? Tzrichin letzaref imahem acher. So we'll say in this case, each witness needs to go ahead and include another one in order to go ahead and certify the signature. So we'll say, so again, also, Divrei Rebbe, these are the words of Rebbe. So we'll say, so again, just follow the cases. Case number one, Reuven comes in and says, that's my signature, and that's Shimon's signature. Shimon comes in and says, that's my signature, that's Reuven's signature. Good to go. We've got two witnesses on each signature. Case number two, Reuven comes in and says, that's my signature. I don't know Shimon's handwriting. Shimon comes in and says, that's my signature. I don't recognize Reuven. So what do we do now? So Rebbe says, what do we have to do? Each one has to go out and bring another aid, right? So ultimately, again, look at Rashi. So we'll say, Rebbe says like this. Essentially, we need to bring in another aid who recognizes both of the signatures. Right? Now, the truth is, it could be both of the signatures or two Eidim will recognize one of the signatures. The idea is, Rebbe says, okay, now all you have is one witness on each signature. The ideal would be bring in Levi, who recognizes both Ruvain's and Shimon's signatures, and now we're good to go. We've got two witnesses on each signature. So we'll say, Rebbe's just staying consistent with the Mishnah. Rebbe's just saying, in order to certify signatures on a document, you need two Eidim. The Chum say, no. Chum omrim einam tzrichen l'tzarif iman acher. No, you don't need anyone else to testify over here. Why? Ella ne'eman adam lomar zek sav yadi. So Rabbi say, listen to this. Chum come along and say, no, you don't need additional eidos. What do you need? You need to go ahead and certify signatures. How do you certify signatures? Right? The truth is, all you need is for a person to come along, an aide to come along and say, that's my signature. That's my signature. And once a person says, that's my signature, we're done. We're done. There's nothing more to talk about after that. So I will say, so a fundamental machlokes. So let's go one more time with what we agree with. Right? What we agree with is case number one. Reuven comes along and says, that's my signature, and I recognize Shimon's. Shimon comes along and says, that's my signature, I recognize Reuven. We've got two witnesses on each signature, good to go. Case number two, Reuven comes in, he recognizes, he attests, that's mine. I can't talk about Shimon's, I don't know anything about Shimon's. Shimon comes in and says, that's mine. Rebbe says, great, you have one witness on each signature. All you need is what? Ideally, one more guy who recognizes both signatures, and you're good to go. That'll give you two witnesses on each signature. The Chum say, what are you talking about? You don't need two witnesses. In order to, let's go back for a second. When do we need two witnesses on a signature? When do we need that? In a case where the witnesses themselves are not certifying their signature. But whenever you have witnesses show up in Beis Din and a witness says, Ze ksav yadi, that's my signature. They both say, what's the halacha? What's the halacha say? We're done. You don't need additional eidos after that. Once someone says, that's my signature, ein alma ledaber, there's nothing more to talk about, we're done. So fundamental machlokes Rebbe and the Chacham. Here we go, says the Gemara. Kishatim silomar, last line on Chaf Amud Beis. Kishatim silomar ladivrei Rebbe, top of Chaf Al. So the Gemara wants to understand, what's the machlokes, right? What are they arguing about over here? So here we go. The Kishatim silomar ladivrei Rebbe, top of Chaf Aleph, Aksav yadan hein me'idin. Rabbi say, listen to this. According to Rebbe, it must be that when witnesses come to go ahead and certify a document in Beis Din, what are they testifying on? What are they giving eidos on? So Rebbe would say they're giving eidos on the authenticity of their signature, right? Giving testimony on the authenticity of their signature. But say, listen to this. We'll explain in just a moment. According to Chachamim, no. When witnesses come along and certify a document, they're not going ahead and testifying about their signatures. What are they testifying about? The transaction. And we'll see, hear this? When witnesses come to Beis Din to certify a document, are they just upholding their signatures and we're not really getting into the discussion about the transaction recorded in the document? That's Rebbe? Or no, Chachamim, they're coming to uphold the transaction. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Top Rashi on Chaf Aleph and Dalif. It begins on Chaf Beis. We start here. Aksav yadan hein ba'in lahaid kishem mekayim l'shtara Beis Din lefichach tzarech shnayim al kol ksav uksav. According to Rebbe, when Chachamim come to Beis Din, they are coming to certify their signatures. That certification of signatures is like a regular eidos, and therefore what? You need two witnesses per signature. According to the Chachamim, Rashi says, "L'divrei Chachamim almana shebishtar me'idin, anachnu ra'inu hamalve v'chasamnu or hamilve v'chasamnu hilchach b'trei sagi v'lo tzarich chad minay l'seder." This is incredible. The Chum say when the witnesses themselves. When the witnesses themselves show up in Beis Din, right, and are testifying, witnesses, I didn't dislodge anything here, good. When the witnesses themselves show up in Beis Din, no, I think I'm right. Sorry. When the witnesses themselves show up in Beis Din, I will say, so according to the Chachamim, what are they testifying to? At that point, they're testifying to the actual loan. We're using the loan as an example. They're testifying to the loan. They're not testifying about their signatures. And as I both say, when do we need, this is fascinating. When do we need to uphold, let's think about this just a moment. You have a document that's contested. When do you need to uphold? When do you need eidos about signatures? When? Right? When it's not the eidim themselves who are showing up to Beis Din. In other words, A lent B money. B is claiming lo hayu dvarim me'olam. The document is a forgery. Document is a forgery. You've got Reuven and Shimon going ahead and signing on it. So what does Beis Din do? So I will say, to start to reconstruct the facts, that's crazy. Really, all Beis Din needs to do is prove that what? The document is a valid document. How do you prove that a document is a valid document? In halach, how do you prove a document is a valid document? Certify the signatures. So up until now, what we've been dealing with is exactly that case. Now, I will say, up until now, Reuven and Shimon have never been available. Right? They're on vacation, right? Ben Azmanim, right? They're on vacation, right? They're out of town, right? So halacha l'maisa now, what happens? So up until now, we've been dealing with the situation of how do we certify their signatures? So we've needed eidos on their signatures. So Rebbe says, even in this case, what we're doing is whenever you have eidos on their signatures, halacha l'maisa eidos requires what? 2 witnesses per signature. The Chacham come along and say, what are you talking about? When we have the eidim themselves, we don't have to uphold the document by simply going ahead and certifying their signatures, but rather, what do we do? Let's certify the transaction. So when Reuven and Shimon both show up, and we say, Reuven, did the loan happen? Reuven says, yeah. Shimon, did the loan happen? Yeah. We've got 2 witnesses certifying the transaction. We don't have to be preoccupied with 2 witnesses per signature. So I will say, fundamental machlokis Rebbe and Chachamim about the nature of certifying a document when the witnesses themselves are showing up to Beis Din. To which the Gemara says, okay, pshita, that's obvious. In other words, that's obvious that's the machlokis. Ma'odatema, what would you have thought? Ma'odatema, the Rebbe sapul gemisapkilei, iyal ksav yodam hemeidin o amona shebishtar hemeidin. So Rebbe saying, I would have thought that maybe Rebbe himself is mesupak. Right? In other words, Rebbe say, the Chachamim's position I understand. Right? The Chachamim hold that Allah Chalamaisa. First of all, I will say, just to understand how it's happening over here. When the Chachamim said in the Mishnah, Adam ne'eman Adam lomar zek ksav yadi. A person is believed to say, this is my signature. There are 2 things that Chacham are saying. Is that number 1, that the way to uphold the signature, if it's the witness himself who's saying that this is my signature, he himself is believed, you don't need 2 eidim. But what he's also saying is that when the 2 eidim who signed on the shtar show up in Beis Din to attest to the authenticity of the shtar, they're not simply attesting to the authenticity of their signatures. They're attesting to the authenticity of the transaction itself. They're being made they're giving testimony about the transaction. That's why all you need is the 2 of them. You don't need anyone else. The Chum's position is definitive. The Gemara says, what's the Havamina? The Havamina is maybe Rebbe himself was Musupak. Maybe Rebbe wasn't sure. Ultimately, again, when the witnesses themselves show up, are the witnesses testifying about their signatures, or are they testifying about the actual transaction? The nafkamina. So I will say, where would the nafkamina case be? Listen to this. The nafkamina. Heicha demis chad minayu. I will say, what happens if one of them died? Let's say Reuven died. Shimon is alive and well. Reuven died. So I will say, then what will be the halacha? Would we require libai shnayim min hashuk laha'id alav? Would we require another 2 witnesses from the shuk, from the marketplace, to go ahead and give eidos? Because I will say, if that would be the case, the imkein kanofik nechi riva de mamona apuna dechad de sada. So I will say, this is actually a very interesting case. If you look at Rashi says over nafkamina, it's a very, very long Rashi. We're not going to do all of it, but I just want to show you some of it. Look at Rashi. V'nafkamina ben savik levade. So I will say, we're asking now in the shita of Rebbe. In the shita of Rebbe, is Rebbe definitive on his shita that when the Eidim show up, they're coming to attest to the authenticity of their signatures and not testifying about the transaction? Or maybe he was a bit mesupok. Now I'll be the Sara. We'll say, look at Rashi. V'nafkamina bein safek levadai l'shnayim hachasumin al hashtar umeis echamen. We'll say, this is such a great case. Reuven and Shimon signed on a document. Reuven died. Okay. Sarech shnayim and hashuk laha'id alav. So we'll say, now listen to this. Now, would you require, so now here's what we need. We need someone to go ahead and authenticate Reuven's signature because Reuven's dead. Shabbos say, here's the shaila. Can we go ahead and allow Shimon, together with another aide, maybe to go ahead and authenticate the document, right? Or do we require two independent witnesses from the marketplace to authenticate Reuven's signature? Now, why? What does it matter? We'll say, listen to this. Because we don't want Shimon testifying about his signature and Reuven's signature as well. And I will say, because I can say like this, maybe what we should do is like this. In a case where Shimon recognizes both, let Shimon go ahead and attest to the authenticity of his signature and Reuven's signature, and just bring another aid as well. The Dilma Almana Shebishtarhi Meidin, because they're about to say, maybe according to Rebbe, they're testifying about the transaction. V'chi Omer Zek Sav Yodi Nafik Palga de Mamona Apume V'zeh Shemeid Imo Al Chasimasalo Ma'alev Lo Mori De'eno Tzarechlo V'chi Hadar Mesarif Imahu Min Ashuk La Haida Chasima Sameis Hadar Nafik Riva de Mamona Apume Eshtachach Techuli Mamon Nechiriva Nafik Apume. Let's listen to this. This is pretty wild. According to Rebbe, if you would hold that they're testifying on the transaction, watch this. In a case where Reuven died, so Shimon comes along and Shimon testifies about his signature. Then we'll say, now we could be mitzarif for another aid along with him, but it doesn't really matter. Once Shimon's testifying about his own signature, that's good. Let's say Shimon also recognizes Reuven's signature. Therefore, we'll say what? So therefore, Reuven will testify. Shimon will testify. That's also Reuven's signature, and we'll bring another aid to testify along with Shimon about Reuven's signature. But see, here's the problem with that eidos. It turns out, listen to how credible this is. 3/4 of the claim is decided by one witness. How is that so? Because you're about to say, essentially, when Shimon comes along and says, that's my signature, effectively, he's like 2 witnesses. When he then testifies about the authenticity of Reuven's signature, along with another aid, so I will say, 3/4 of the testimony is coming from Shimon, 1/4 is coming from the other aid. And the Gemara says, Rashi points out over here, Va'anan api shnayim eidim ba'inan, chatzi davar al piv shalzeh, v'chatzi davar al piv shalzeh. This is wild. They will say, this is a fascinating halacha, and it's a fascinating drasha. Rashi's understanding over here that when witnesses come to give testimony, it's got to be at least close to an even split of testimonial knowledge. Now, the truth is, the classic situation of eidos is where both eidim know what? Both eidim know what? Everything, right? Both eidim know everything. Sometimes you could piece together partial information, but in a transactional sense, where we see that essentially one aid is bringing 3/4 of the eidos, and the other aid is bringing 1/4 of the eidos, that is a lopsided testimonial unit and will not work. The Gemara is just highlighting, according to Rebbe, what is the potential safek. Back to the Gemara. So I'll say, therefore, maybe according to Rebbe, we should go in both directions. L'chumra. Kamash malan the Rebbe mifshat pshitale bein l'kula bein l'chumra. All right, I will say. So the Gemara entertains the Havamina. Rashi goes on and explains the rest of the Havamina. For our purposes, the Gemara just says, Rebbe is not mesupak. Rebbe is clear on his shita that according to Rebbe, when witnesses show up in Beis Din to certify a shtar, what are they certifying, Rebbe will say? What are they certifying? They're certifying signatures, which Rebbe will say, by the way, just to understand Rebbe's position, it makes a lot of sense. What's the logic of saying we certify signatures and not transactions? Not transactions. He'll say, you ever have a conversation with someone, a difficult conversation where you're working through something and you reach resolution, right? And you know that happiness, that simcha, like when you finally reach a resolution. And you ever have a situation where a day later, the person, it may be your spouse for argument's sake, right? But the person brings up the same conversation, and you're good, right? It's been a mitzvah, I'm working on my ben adam lechavero, right? And I'm saying to us, didn't we just have this conversation? Right? We worked through this. It was great. We sat down. I didn't even check my email. Right? I was attentive the entire time. We worked through it. Right? We had this conversation already, and we reached the resolution. So I will say, lahavdil. Rebbe says like this: we don't want to start revisiting transactions, because the moment we start revisiting transactions is every single contested document is going to become now a whole new din Torah in transactions. So Rebbe says, no. When you have a document, if it's contested, we're going to do one thing and one thing only, which is what? Certify signatures. And if we could certify signatures, we're done. We're done. We are not getting into having this whole transactional conversation again. So we'll say it's fast. So Rebbe holds, therefore, even when the witnesses themselves show up, Reuven and Shimon themselves show up, we need to certify signatures. How do you certify signatures? 2 witnesses per signature. Now, Reuven saying it's me, and Shimon saying it's me. Bezdin says, I know, Reuven, we love you. Shimon, we love you. Do you have a friend, right? Do you have someone else who could help attest? I will say, it's godless. Whereas the Chachamim say, no. If the witnesses who actually saw the transaction are showing up, what they're really testifying on is what? Is the transaction. And Rabbi said there's a huge nafkamina. According to Rebbe, you're going to need 2 witnesses per signature, even when the Eidim themselves are showing up. According to the Chachamim, if the witnesses themselves are showing up, all you need is what? Them and no one else. Fantastic. Rabbi said, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, V'i lekatrei elachad mai. So what about in a situation where halacha lemaisa, let's say again, in the case where one of the witnesses died, right? Reuven died. Let's say Rabbi say halacha lemaisa, there aren't 2 witnesses who recognize the signature of Reuven, the dead witness. Elachad, Rashi says, Elachad, v'ze'achai nami makira ma'inav. Rabbi say, here's the following situation. Let's say Reuven died. And what? So now I need 2 witnesses to go ahead and certify Reuven's signature. So I only have 1, but it happens to be that Shimon does recognize Reuven's signature as well. Is that actionable or not? So I'm going to Abaye. So we'll listen to this. Abaye says, this is incredible. So we'll say, so remember, here's the issue. The issue, of course, is that we don't want to have a situation where the majority of testimony is coming from one witness over the other, right? So remember again, if I've got Shimon testifying about his own signature and testifying about Shimon's and Reuven's signature, we've got lopsided testimony. So Abaye says, so what can you do? I'll say, watch this. Lichtov chasimas yadei chasba. Here's what Shimon should do. Shimon should write his signature on a piece of clay, v'shadilei bebeidina, and throw it into Beis Din. Not literally throw it into Beis Din, right? But deposit it in Beis Din. They will say, watch this. Umechaskilei beidina v'chazulei v'lo tzarich ihu la'ased chasimas yadei. Watch this. See, Rabbi say, if Shimon writes his signature on a piece of clay, throws that piece of clay into Beis Din. Beis Din now has the piece of clay. So I will say, what could Beis Din now do? What could Beis Din do? They can go ahead and authenticate Shimon's signature without Shimon having to say a word. Because I will say you could do that. Remember, we saw this before. You could authenticate signatures from other documents without testimony. So this I will say, well, it's godless. What is Shimon doing? Abai is such a great idea. Essentially, Shimon corroborate or certify your signature without having to be made, without having to give edus. So write it down on the piece. And therefore what? Va'azol ihi v'hai umaseda idach. And then Shimon could go with the other witness and what? Certify Reuven, the dead witness's signature. Beautiful, incredible. But the Gemara says, however, v'dafka chaspa. By the way, we only want you to do this on a piece of clay. Avala magilta lo, but don't do it on a piece of parchment. Why not? So it is incredible. Dilma mashkach le'inish delo ma'ali the kasav iluye. I will say because maybe you'll find it if you put it on a piece of parchment. I will say, right? You find someone's signature on a piece of parchment. What can you do? The possibilities are endless. What you could do, right? We could write because we'll see in just a moment what you could do. The kasav iluye. My deboy. And the concern would be ultimately again that a person may find it and may ultimately go ahead and do something. Do whatever he wants to document. I will say, what can you do with the document? Take a look at Rashi. This is actually fascinating. First white line in Rashi. Because of my deboy, you ask yourself, I don't understand. If I write Shmuel Silber on a piece of parchment, what is someone going to do with that? Right? What can you possibly do with it? Look at Rashi. Lemala min hachasima yichtov mach shezeh hachasum lava mana mimenu v'kosev kachani ploni hachasum lamata levisimi ploni. I will say, listen to this. There is such a document that if a person writes, I borrowed money from Shimon, and I, the borrower, put my signature on that document, that is a binding loan document. That's chasimas yad halova. In other words, if the borrower himself signs the shtar, that has the power of a regular loan document. So I will say, so if I go ahead and I write my name on a piece of parchment, and there's room on the top part of that piece of parchment, someone could literally come along and write what? That I, Shmuel Leba, borrowed money, and again, that will be an enforceable document because it has my signature on it. I will say, I'll just tell you something so interesting about this Gemara. I will say, one of the greatest conflicts we have in Bein Adam Lechavero is how are you supposed to view people? I will say it's a fundamental like machlokes. Should you view people as inherently good, and when people do something bad, it's an aberration? Or ultimately, again, no, people are inherently bad. People are inherently bad, and people, given the opportunity, will go ahead and stab you in the back and will take advantage of you. And essentially, trust no one until they earn your trust. Trust has to be earned, but trust is not the default. And I will say it's two different. Now, the truth is, from our hashkafa, we absolutely believe that people are inherently good. People are inherently good, right? But ultimately, again, people make mistakes. People make mistakes. But the way to view another individual, the key to v'ahavta l're'acha kamocha is to believe that people at their core are good. And when they do something that is bad, that's an aberration. So what do you do with the Gemara like this? So what you do with the Gemara like this is Chazal are teaching us, no one is beyond temptation. No one is beyond temptation. Sometimes the greatest mistake we make in life is I think, I would never do that. Rabbi say, given the opportunity, any of us would do anything. Any of us would do anything. And it is important to recognize this inherent human frailty. Because the moment we think that we're above a certain temptation, the moment I think I would never commit that avera. Oh, all these other ones for sure I would do, right? But that one I wouldn't do. I will say there are many tragic stories that are written that begin with people who said, I would never do that, and then end up doing it. And I will say, it's okay. In other words, so what's the proper hashkafa? The proper hashkafa is, I know that I'm capable of doing anything. I know that I'm capable of making any kind of mistake, which is why I have to be vigilant at all times. So when Chazal say, don't write your name on a piece of parchment and just leave it out. That's not Chazal saying, people are bad. People are going to take advantage of you if you let them. What it's saying is, no one is beyond temptation. And even an upright, honest individual who sees a piece of parchment with Shmuel Leba written on it may have a very strong temptation to utilize that for his own benefit. And may in fact do that. View people as inherently good. And when they make mistakes, those are fundamental personalistic aberrations. But at the end of the day, also realize that no one, including ourselves, is beyond any level of temptation for any type of avera. Such an incredible yisod. Utnan, the Gemara says we learned, and also here we just see it. If a person produces a document, right? Reuven produces a document and it has my signature on it. No edim, but it says, I, Shmuel Leba, borrowed $10,000 from Reuven. Halacha l'maisa, again, that is an enforceable claim, granted only against nechasim b'nei chorin, not nechasim mishubadim. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Halacha k'divrei chachamim. The halacha is like the Chachamim Rabbi say that halacha l'maisa again. Halacha l'maisa when the edim themselves show up in Beis Din to certify a document, Reuven and Shimon show up. They are certifying the transaction, and all we need is Reuven and Shimon, no other testimony. To which the Gemara says, Pshita yochid ram halacha kirabim. That's obvious, Rabbi say. It's a machlokis Rebbe and the Chachamim. Chachamim are a group. Rebbe is an individual. Halacha always follows the group. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi say, in general, the halacha is that the halacha follows Rebbe over his fellow disputants. So I might have thought over here, maybe in this case, so the Gemara says, maybe the halacha always follows Rebbe, even when Rebbe is the minority opinion. Kamash Malo, no. Kamash Malo say that that's not the case. And therefore, Rabbi say the Gemara rules that halacha l'maisa the Chachamim are believed, and therefore when Reuven and Shimon themselves show up in Beis Din to testify about their signature, all we need is Reuven and Shimon. We do not need any other testimony to join with them. Why? Because Adam ne'eman Adam lomar zek savyadi. Person is believed to say, that's my signature. That's my signature, and that's it. I will say on a deeper level, we pass like the Chachamim, that when the witnesses themselves who signed the document show up to certify the document, they're in fact not certifying signatures. What are they doing? They're certifying the transaction. Certifying the transaction. Beautiful. Says the Gemara. So Amar le Rav Chanina bar Chia Rav Yehuda, Amar le Rav Huna bar Yehuda Rav Yehuda, Amar le Rav Chia bar Yehuda Rav Yehuda. Somebody said to somebody, right? Umi Amar Shmuel Hachi. Did Shmuel actually say this? Right? Did Shmuel actually say that the halacha follows the Chachamim? Is that really true? Listen to this. There was a certain shtar that came out of the Beis Din of Mar Shmuel. And what happened? They will say, here's what the document said in it. Mida'asa Rav Anan bar Chia, va'asid achasimos yadei, va'adechad di'imei. When Rav Anan bar Chia came along, and what happened? He went ahead and he testified about Chasimas Yadeh, his signature, and one with him, Umanu Rav Chanan Barava. Umida Rav Chanan Baraba va'ased Chasimas Yadeh va'adechad di'imei. So we'll say, and then Rav Chanan Baraba came along and testified about his signature, and the signature of the other one, Umanu Rav Anan bar Chia. Asherinu v'kaiminu kidachaz. We upheld the shtar. So we'll say, what was happening in this document? In this document, what they recorded was essentially each aide testified about his signature and the other's signature. We'll say this is the first case of the Mishnah, where essentially what did you have? Therefore, what did you have? Two witnesses on each signature. Rabbi say that sounds like whose position? Rebbe. And this document is coming out of the Beis Din of Shmuel. See, here you see a certified shtar from the Beis Din of Shmuel has two witnesses for each signature. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. I'm sorry. Amar Le'ahu shtara diyasmi hava. They both say that was a different kind of shtar. That was ultimately, again, what we call a shtara diyasmi. Now, both say, so this was a shtar that had to do with the property of yisomim, of orphans. And both say, in general, the halacha is very careful with the estate of yisomim, because often that estate, is subject to unscrupulous individuals, and therefore we take additional care and concern in preserving the estate. Now watch this. The chash Shmuel lebeis din toin. And Shmuel was concerned about a Beis Din that would not be as vigilant in the future. Look at Rashi. The chash Shmuel, it's 5 lines up from the bottom of Rashi. Shimlo kasav bo ela ploni heyed al ksav yado, uploni heyed al ksav yado, shema kishiotziu hayisom shtar zebe Beis Din lagabos, ya osa Beis Din toa, lomar shalacha kirebi, firma she'en zekiyum. So I will say, essentially over here what's happening is, Rebbe was machmir. That ultimately, again, Shmuel. Shmuel was machmir. So I will say, so here's what we're saying is, Shmuel is like the Chachamim. And therefore, again, according to the Chachamim, when witnesses show up, Reuven and Shimon show up to Beis Din, and Reuven says, that's my signature, and Shimon says, that's my signature, what else do you need? Nothing. We're done. But what about in this shtar, where Shmuel required the witness to testify about his signature and the other witness, right? Reuven had to testify that that's mine and that's Shimon's. And Shimon said, that's mine and that's Reuven's. He required 2 witnesses per signature. Why? Different case. He was being machmir. I will say this was a case of the estate of Yisomim, and he was concerned about a future Beis Din that would make a mistake. And therefore, again, the Gemara says, "V'chash Shmuel the Beis Din toen, v'sarva Shmuel dilma ika disrele halacha kari mechavirav, v'lo mechaviro." He was concerned that a future Beis Din might think the halacha follows Rebbe. Ubaha afilu mechavirav savar iyavid ravacha keichid lo mafsid yasmi. So we'll say essentially, Rebbe was machmir. Shmuel was machmir, that even though Shmuel paskins the halacha follows the Chachamim, he was concerned that a future Beis Din might think that the halacha follows Rebbe and would therefore invalidate this shtar. So what did Shmuel essentially want to do? He wanted to make this certification of this document kosher according to all opinions. Therefore, the Yisomim would not run into any problems. Incredible. Shmuel. Aid v'dayin mitzarfen. I'll say an interesting halacha. An aid, right, a witness, and a dayan, and one of the judges could go ahead and combine to certify signatures. Look at Rashi. Aid v'dayin, 3 lines up from the bottom in Rashi. Aid v'dayin, shtar shekasav bo henpik, v'chasmu hadayanin al henpik shalo, v'la'achar zman kishotziu hamal v'legabos Irer halo velomar mezuyafu, uba echad me'edei ashtar, veheyed al ksav yado, ve'echad min hadayonim heyed al ksav yado, mistarfen lach shiro. So I will say literally what this sounds like over here is that one of the Eidim and the Dayan, bless you, could go ahead and combine to uphold one of the signatures. What a beautiful teaching. So the Gemara said, Amar Rava, my mal yusa. Why is that a good teaching? That's terrible. My de kamasid sahada lo kamasid dayana, umad de kamasid dayana lo kamasid sayada. So we'll say, listen to this. This is fascinating. So ultimately, and I will say, just to throw in one more wrinkle, what's happening over here? We're talking about over here halacha lemaisa of a shtar that had a handpick. A handpick, I will say, hey nun pei kuf is a certification. This is a certification. We're going to see the text of it on Amud Beis. So this is literally a certification that says this shtar was brought before Beis Din, it was challenged in front of Beis Din, and we certified the shtar. So as I said, just to illustrate the case over here. So A lent B $10,000. The document was signed by witnesses. It was even certified in a Beis Din. B now comes along and says the whole thing is forged. The whole thing is forged. The document is forged. The signatures are forged. The handpick, the certification is forged. So we'll say, now what is the Gemara saying? They bring this document to Beis Din. So we'll say, listen to this. So now let's say one of the Eidim, we'll call him Ruvain. Ruvain says, no, that's my document. And that's my signature. And one of the Dayanim says, that's my handwriting from the certification. So Rabbi says, so now comes along, Rabbi says Shmuel, the aid and the Dayan could go in and combine together to uphold the shtar. Right? So you have two witnesses certifying to the authenticity of the shtar. So comes along Rava, and Rava says, how could that happen? They're testifying about what? About what? Two different things. Reuben is testifying that this is his signature. Dayan, right? The judge is testifying that's what? That ultimately, again, that the certification is correct. It's not, you don't have two witnesses testifying on the same thing. You have two witnesses testifying to two separate things. Lotis is sinhu lahani klali. They call Yehuda achi mishmei deshma. This is pretty incredible. Rabbi Cheskel says, listen, guys, don't listen to anything my brother Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel. Good old sibling rivalry, right? Don't go ahead. My brother Yehuda doesn't know what he's talking about. When he hears stuff in the name of Shmuel, he always gets it mixed up. Amud Beis. So I'll say, what happened? Ikla Rabbanoi achud Rabbi Chibar Abba lemizban shumshmi. Here we go. So Rabbanoi. So again, we're still not exactly sure. So we have Rabbi Yehuda's same name as Shmuel, that an aid, a witness, and a dayan could go ahead and form a testimonial unit to certify a shtar. Now again, the problem with this that Rava brought up is that how could that be? They're testifying about two separate things. Here, the aid is testifying about his signature, and the dayan is testifying about the certification. Okay, so we leave that on the side. So here we go, a story. Ikla Rabbanoi achud Rabbi Chiya bar Abba lebizman shumshmi. So Rabbanoi, the brother of Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, went to go ahead and buy sesame seeds. V'amar hachi amar Shmuel, and while he's out buying sesame seeds, apparently he conveyed the following. Ei amar Shmuel, eid v'dayan mitztarfen. That an eid and a dayan in fact, have the ability to combine. So I will say, so once again, in this case over here, so we'll call him B, the borrower is claiming everything in this document is forged. The document is a forgery, the signatures are a forgery, the handpick, the certification, which is written on the shtar is a forgery, everything is a forgery. So comes along, Rabbi Noah, he says the name of Shmuel, that if Ruvain, the aide, says, that's my signature, and Dayan says, yes, I wrote that certification, the combination of those two is enough to certify the document. Amra Meir said, Kama mal yahosh maisa. Wow, that is such a great ruling. Amra Rashid Meir, Mishum the kalsa avua di imach at nami mekalsale. Because your grandfather praised this ruling, you're also going to praise it. Rabbi say his grandfather was Rami Bar Chama. Because your grandfather praised it, now you're going to praise it. Kavar parcha Rabba. Rabba already destroyed it. So I will say, it appears that at the end of the day, we reject this idea of Shmuel, that an aid and a dayan cannot combine to go ahead and form a testimonial unit to certify a document. Why? Why not? Because you're testifying about two separate things. because the aid is upholding his signature. The dayan is upholding the handpicked, the certification. So because they're talking about two different things, even though it's the same shtar, ultimately they cannot combine. Very interesting. Amar Rav Safra, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Marta, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Here we go. Shlosha sheyashvu l'kayim es hashtar. So we'll say very interesting case. Let's say three people sit down. Three people. We'll say this. Now this is a beis din. So we'll say here's the case. Right? A lent B $10,000. It's in a shtar. B comes along and says forgery, Sheva forgeries. No, not good. So now a beis din is sitting down to certify this document. Is the document legit or not? So we'll say. So what happens? So shnayim makir and chasim misedei eidin ve'echad eino makir. So we'll say. Now watch this fascinating case. Here the beis din is sitting on the beis din itself. Two of the dayanim recognize the signatures, right? Right. Two of the dayanim recognize the signatures, and ultimately, again, one does not. One does not. So we'll say, look at Rashi just a moment. L'kayim ashtar u'below ha'adas edim sheyedu al ksav yadan l'fisha dayana asan akirin osan shlema akirin osavachar. So we'll say, it's just an interesting case here. Beis din is coming along to certify the document, and they're not utilizing witnesses. They're not utilizing witnesses. So we'll say, on the beis din, two, Dayan 1 and Dayan 2 recognize the signatures. Dayan 3 recognizes nothing. So what do we do? It's an incredible case. What do we do in this case? So the Evechad Eino Makir. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry. Shnai Makir Chasim Misedei Eidim. Ve'echad Eino Makir Eid. So I'm sorry. Evechad Eino Makir. So here we go. Ad shelo chasmu midin befanav v'chosem. As long as they did not yet sign the certification, we'll say what we're going to call the handpick, the certification, ultimately the two can testify about their knowledge of the signatures in front of the third who does not know, and then that is enough edus to give the third the requisite knowledge, and he could sign on the certification. We'll say again one more time. Beis din is sitting, three dayanim, Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. There's a contested shtar that's come in front of them. There's no witnesses here. Beis din wants to certify the shtar. Dayan, Aleph, and Beis, they recognize the signatures. Gimel doesn't know anything. So listen to what the Brisa just said. As long as they have not yet signed on the certification, Dayanim, Aleph, and Beis could give testimony in front of Gimel and authenticate the signatures based on that testimony. So Dayan Gimel now becomes fully versed in the signatures as well, and all of the Dayanim can now sign on the certification. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So the Gemara says, now watch this, the Gemara says, fine, sorry. However, if they already signed the certification before giving that testimony in front of the third dayan, then ultimately, again, the certification is invalid. So the Gemara says, okay, let's analyze this. So we'll say, now obviously that second case makes sense. Why? Because if the beis din signed on a certification, but dayan number 3 did not yet receive the testimony of the first two, then what's the nature of that certification? It's false. It's false. Because the certification says, as we're going to see in just a moment, that all of the dayanim are aware about the certification of the shtar. So if they signed it before giving testimony before dayan number 3, of course that is not going to work. Nebo say, the Gemara has a more fundamental question. Umi kasvinan. Nebo say, so just here's what seems to be happening. Just to play this out, here's seeing what's happening over here. The beis din is looking at the shtar. Great. Good news is, Dayan Aleph, Dayan Beis, they recognize Reuven and Shimon's signatures. So we're all good. Dayan Gimel doesn't know anything. Fine, not a problem. There's a process. Now, it sounds like what happened over here is as follows. They're writing up the certification already. They're writing it up. Why are they writing it up? Now they're writing it up even before they gave testimony in front of Dayan Gimel. Why are they writing it up now? Why? I don't know, to save time. To save time. They're not signing it, but they're writing it up. So they're thinking it's like this. Let's write up the certification because we know we're going to give our testimony in front of Dayan Gimel. Let's write up our certification. We'll give our testimony in front of Dayan Gimel. And after he receives our testimony, then what? What are we going to do? We'll all sign. But we'll save ourselves a little bit of time, but we'll all sign. So Meir said, you're allowed to do that? Are you allowed even to write up a certification before all the dayanim are aware about the authenticity of the document? This judicial certification. You're not even allowed to write up what we call a handpick, an authentication or certification of the document before all of the dayanim know that the document is correct. The mischazik is shikra. Because they'll say, it looks like what? It looks like you're lying. Look at Rashi. They'll say, this is actually incredible. Rashi says over here, fine, actually we don't have to answer it, we'll see afterwards. Good. So we'll say, so therefore the Gemara says, how could they even write it up ahead of time? Ela ima achelo kasvu meidim befanav v'chosem misha kasvu in meidim befanav v'chosem. So we'll say, so bottom line, the Gemara says, you're right. Here's the proper process. So we'll say, so just to go through this case, here we go. So what's happening over here is, 3 dayanim are sitting down. Contested document comes before them. There are no witnesses, but the good news is, Dayan Aleph, Dayan Beis, they recognize the signatures of Reuven and Shimon. Fantastic. Gimel does not. So we'll say, what's the process? Let's go through it. What's the process? Process is that essentially Aleph and Beis are going to give testimony in front of Gimel. What's the nature of their testimony? We recognize the signatures of Reuven and Shimon. And we'll say, what's the beauty of it? 2 witnesses per signature, because they both of them recognize both. And now Gimel becomes fully informed. Now Gimel has total knowledge. Now Rabbi say what happens? Now they all become a Beis Din again. And what does the Beis Din do? The Beis Din writes, Rabbi say, what we call the handpick. The Beis Din writes the certification. Beautiful. What a great case. But a couple of caveats. What are the caveats? You can't write the certification before when? Before Gimel has full knowledge. If you write that certification before Gimel has full knowledge, then that looks like a lie. You're writing something that's untrue. Forget about signing it. You can't even write it up. Says the Gemara, Shema Mina Tlas. So we'll say we learn 3 things from here. Number 1, Shema Mina Eid Naaseh Dayan. Number 1 lesson is that a witness can become a judge. Right? Because remember what's happening over here, right? The first part of this is that Dayan A and Dayan B at first are not Dayanim. What are they? They're witnesses. They're giving testimony before Gimel, and then after they finish their testimony, they morph into judges. That's number 1. Shema mina dana makira chasimas de'edim ein tzrichen la b'fneihen. We'll say halakha number 2 that we learn is when judges themselves recognize signatures, we do not need supplemental testimony to uphold those signatures. That's what's happening in this case. Ushma mina dayanin she'in makirin chasimas de'edim. And I'll say furthermore, we learned that when you have judges, ultimately, again, who do not recognize signatures, we have to halacha l'maisa give testimony in front of each of the individual judges. Rashi says over here, tzrichen lahad b'fnei kol echad ve'echad, shemeidu b'fnei shnayim ein hagimel yachal lachtom, ta'hachal hutzrucha shnayim lahad b'fnei hagimel. So we'll explain that last part tomorrow, Meir Hashem. But again, halacha l'maisa, when giving testimony about a witness, you have to give testimony in front of each judge. We'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up at Meir Hashem with these 3 lessons. Meir Hashem tomorrow. Shkoyach. We'll say Zoom.